Hello everybody, and we've got a very testosterone-fueled topical talkology talk today, because there's three men and no women, and we're going to talk about a very sensitive subject today. So let's get started. So hi Theo.
Hello, how are you, Andy?
I'm great, and
both of us. Good. Welcome, Yogi.
Hi Theo. Hi Andy.
Hello everybody. Yeah.
Hello.
Thanks for coming up.
So basically we weren't even going to start talking about this today, and we were having a conversation over a cup of coffee before we got started. As we do, and we were talking about something that happened in the Big Brother house. It's probably about 2-3 weeks ago now. The thing is, because I don't really watch the Big Brother. No. It only came up in my YouTube news feed, and it was this situation with a woman called Roxanne Pallett, I think her name was. She was a soap actress on Emmerdale, and this guy called Ryan, who was on Coronation Street. And what happened was, and I saw the clip, and it was this, he was play fighting with her, and the play fighting lasted probably about 3 seconds, where he pretended to punch her, hardly touched her, and she made a big song and dance about it, really, that she wanted him out the house, she needed a separate room because she didn't feel safe around him, all this sort of stuff, and all the other people believed her. And it's not so much that they probably even wanted to believe her, but they got to be seen as having the perception to believe her, just to feel as though actually they're on the right moral compass. So anyway, it transpired there was a lot of noise outside this reality show, and turns out she as one of the well to cut long story short, this guy who she accused was literally having a breakdown from it all, and because it was a career changer. And what happened was, it turns out when she looked at it, she goes, "Oh, I've got it so wrong." Oh, yeah. That's okay then, because we were talking about because Yogi was talking about men who've been accused have actually gone and committed suicide on the end of this. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Well, actually, I was thinking as you were relaying the story that the Big Brother house has actually done exactly what it's supposed to do for once in its life.
It's create drama.
Well, it's meant to be us looking in on people's lives, right? And it's one of the topics that thankfully came up, because this happens in society behind the doors of the court all the time.
That's
People's
correct.
lives are destroyed, and I think one of the most important concepts is anonymity, which some MPs are advocating for in matters where men are accused, and until they are only alleged and not found guilty, that they should maintain anonymity in certain cases, which it isn't at the moment.
Yeah.
Right? So at the moment, under an allegation, the press can go absolutely wild on someone. The reasoning behind it is, in case he's done it to someone else, it's sort of an appeal. By the way, so-and-so has been alleged to have done this, if he has done it to you, which is strange because it doesn't happen in a lot of other crimes. You don't say, so-and-so has been, accused of stealing something.
He nicked a Mars bar 20 years ago, and we can identify a pattern there, right?
Even if it was something more sinister, it doesn't happen. So-and-so is alleged to have broken into a house. You don't run over. The media doesn't go and run with that story necessarily.
Well, they do run with things. I mean, even Cliff Richard was accused, and this is all it takes these days. It takes just an accusation, because
for that, though.
He did. But how many hoops did he have to climb through to get that? It was because a weaker person would have, a weaker person or a more fragile person, because men can be fragile as well. Would have taken certain matters into their own hands.
Well, indeed, and what this is an example of psychologically is anchoring, which we mentioned last week. And so the public are being anchored with the idea that men are powerful predators who abuse women.
Yes.
So they're being anchored with that idea. So this means that if there's any question of anything coming up, then people will automatically think that the man is a powerful sexual predator. And this idea of anchoring is really misunderstood. So, for instance, recently they adjusted in a few situations. For instance, in America, they put a limit on the amount of compensation a jury can fine a company. Because in the past they used to go for tens of millions of dollars, and now they've limited to, I don't know, let's say $1.5 million. But what that's done because of anchoring is that the jury have now been anchored with $1.5 million, so they go straight for $1.5 million.
Right.
This means that all the small companies are being put out of business who can't afford the $1.5 million fines, and the big companies are happy to pay it.
Right.
So
and even if the liability should be greater than that.
That's right. And indeed, even if it's not true,
yes,
either.
They
so
can settle, yeah.
That's it. Because the jury is much more likely to think, well, $1.5 million. They're going to be less tight on the burden of proof. And I think I heard Jermaine Greer talking about issues of sexual misconduct yesterday.
Yes, and she got rinsed for it.
But that's because
by who?
She called for lower sentencing, but what she then went on to say is
she was the feminist of the.
Yeah, but hang on a second. I need to finish off what she said. So she said, no, I didn't just say that. Essentially, it's very rare to successfully prosecute someone for rape, because the jury are well aware that on their say someone's going to go to prison for 10 years, roughly. And if there's any scintilla of doubt, they're likely to let the guy off. So she said...
It's not just, well...
So she said, it would make a lot more sense for the prison term to be lowered and for them to understand there are different categories of rape, in which case the jury would then have a more considered outcome in their opinion of whether someone's guilty.
Did you know, it also... I mean, this happens in the States quite a lot, particularly on the university campuses over there, because they have their dorm parties and they have their sororities and fraternities and things like this. And there was one case not so long ago where there was this football player who'd got a scholarship to this university, and this girl decided to have a threesome with him and her friend, and obviously regretted it the following day because he didn't want, she felt probably maybe was ashamed, or her parents had found out, so she cried rape. So she did all that, and I don't know the reason why, but anyway, she admitted to that she'd been lying. But in the meantime, that poor guy's career was destroyed. He was thrown out of university. He was arrested. He went through all that.
Yeah.
And all that does play heavily on an individual.
There's a process where it's the Title 9, which they put in, that says that if they don't set up certain courts, procedures in place that the university has to take on to deal with sexual assault on campus, then they will be withheld funding.
That's right.
This was federal led. But one thing, just to walk this back to proving rape. Firstly, I like your point that you should have a female perspective on this, right? In this.
Yeah, they wanted to have a female perspective,
but we can still, the brain is not necessarily male or female, so we can still have opinions on things.
But this is not exactly, let's put it in inverted commas, locker room talk, is it?
It's not. We'll go into the psychological
perspective as well.
Yeah. So, but it's actually a very intimate crime. It is sometimes difficult to prove, especially in a more nuanced, when the case is a bit more nuanced. There's also very much a lack of evidence.
Yeah, but you don't have to prove it, though. But you don't have to. But you don't have to prove it. All you have to do is make the accusation, and that's it. And all of a sudden,
at the moment, yes.
and all of a sudden, you've got a. You could look, and there's many scenarios. So there's many. Men out there who have crossed the line on a major way, like the Harvey Weinsteins of this world. Yeah. but you've got to consider that a woman is aggrieved by the way the relationship's gone, and then she can just make an accusation. And here's another thing: there's a time frame as well. You've got to consider. Bear with me a second. There's a time frame you've got to consider, because if you come out 20 years later where there is no evidence, and you're wondering why didn't you make that accusation 20 years earlier? And here's the thing I've always said: unless you report the crime when it happens, or within a short time frame of when it happens, you almost have to lose that right to be able to do it. And here's why: because a man can go and rape a woman, and if he's guilty of rape, if she doesn't report it, he'll go and do it to somebody else, and he'll do it to someone else, and he'll do it to someone else.
Yeah, we want and to be reported, right?
Yeah. So there's got to be a time frame. You can't come out 20 years later and say, "Oh, I was assaulted by them, but I didn't say because it was to save my career." There's a choice you have to make. There's a choice whether you actually want to stand by your moral principles as to of the difference between right and wrong, or actually. Or actually compromise your values in terms of a career. But don't come out 20 years later after your career's either gone downhill or whatever and actually say that.
No,
I think that, I mean, what you say has a lot of sense, but you have to bear in mind that if the person was raped, then, and also if they're raped and they're seriously traumatized, then one of the difficulties with that, one of the symptoms of trauma, is that you avoid stimuli likely to trigger recollection. So you will never want to talk about it, let alone face making allegations. So there is that problem. And I think Germaine Greer also said something very important. She said the trauma experienced by the sufferer or claimed by the sufferer is the responsibility of the sufferer, because of course for the same event of anything, not just a serious trauma, the subjective experience will vary from individual to individual. So
exactly.
I actually had a patient who was kept as a sex slave by a large African clan when her tribe was overrun in Africa or something, and she, clearly and clinically told me what happened, and that one of the captors took a shine to her and loosened her bonds and let her escape. And she'd moved to the UK with a friend as an immigrant and was studying law. And clearly she wasn't claiming to be a jelly of trauma and incapable of any kind of proactive action for her life. And I think it's the difficulty is everyone is being encouraged to be traumatized, and again that's part of anchoring. We're anchored to be traumatized, or as someone sent me a picture, he sent me a picture of different generations. So for instance, one generation was at war, another generation was on drugs, and the latest generation, the millennials, are offended.
But the thing that gets me though is that there's this whole victim culture that we're creating in the UK. You only have to a woman, and look, I don't want to put the blame just purely on women here, but and it's not, because there's plenty of men to blame, but a woman. If a man is attracted to a woman and he makes a move on her, now she could claim harassment if she doesn't fancy him, but if she does fancy him, actually it would be considered flirting. So the thing is, where's the line? And when we were talking about companies and the cost that they're going to get, there's a point where you'd have to consider as a company owner or of a small company, actually, is it worth employing women? All right, and then there's another equality issue there of opportunities. Why would you employ a woman if there's the potential that she could make an allegation that could go to court, and you're going to get stung by that?
Well,
And that's happening actually, I think, in some cases, subtly.
I think one thing I've learned is if you choose to focus on something, that's what you'll see. Okay, so if you're choosing to talk about specific issues such as companies having the possibility of a false allegation in that company, then it's not worth hiring women. If you choose to talk about women that make false allegations about men and you focus on that, that's what you'll see. But I personally think that
a real metaphysics route here, right?
Companies should not, small companies where there is a power imbalance, if you like, where your fate can be determined by someone who's your boss and they're not regulated, they're not forced to be regulated, I think, how many women do you know that work for minicab companies, right? And would they? Is it a safe environment for them? And shouldn't we encourage safe environments for everyone? Because,
yeah.
But there's also common sense. There is common sense.
Point.
Do you know